The chandeliers of Somerset House blazed with unforgiving brilliance, casting sharp golden light over the glittering crowd assembled for the season's most celebrated ball. Lady Caroline Whitmore stood alone near the edge of the room, her pale blue silk gown shimmering like frost, her dark curls pinned with care, unaware that within moments everything she knew would shatter like the champagne flutes glinting on silver trays. At 23, Caroline was considered a triumph of her family, the only daughter of Edmund Whitmore, Earl of Hastings, and his devoted wife, Eleanor. Beautiful without vanity, educated without pretension, and possessed of a warm laugh that drew people to her, she had secured what many considered the match of the season, an engagement to Lord Edward Hartley, heir to the Earl of Westbrook. "How you look radiant this evening, my dear," her mother whispered, adjusting the pearl necklace at Caroline's throat. "Edward cannot take his eyes from you." But Eleanor was wrong. Edward's pale blue eyes were fixed not on his betrothed, but on Miss Arabella Cunningham, the newly arrived heiress whose fortune was rumoured to be twice that of Caroline's respectable dowry. The first waltz had just concluded when Edward approached. Caroline smiled, expecting him to claim her hand for the next dance. Instead, his expression was cold, his jaw set. "Lady Caroline, I must speak with you now." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. "Edward, what is wrong?" He took her elbow, not gently, and steered her toward the center of the ballroom. The music had paused. Conversations dimmed. Every eye in Somerset House turned toward them. "Lord Hartley?" Caroline's voice trembled. "Please, you are causing a scene." "A scene?" Edward's laugh was cruel. "My dear Lady Caroline, it is you who have caused the scene. Did you truly believe I would not discover the truth?" The ballroom fell silent. Caroline felt hundreds of eyes burning into her skin. I do not understand your correspondence with Lord Ashby, your secret meetings in the gardens at Vauxhall." Edward's voice rang clear, each word calculated for maximum impact. "Did you think me a fool, that I would marry a woman who has compromised herself so thoroughly?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Caroline's vision blurred with tears. "That is not true. Edward, I have never. Lord Ashby is merely an acquaintance. I have done nothing." "Silence!" Edward's face twisted with theatrical disgust. "I will not bind myself to a woman without virtue. Our engagement is ended. I release you, Lady Caroline, though I fear your reputation is beyond salvage." He turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Caroline standing alone in the center of the ballroom, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. The whispers began immediately, spreading like wildfire through the glittering assembly. "Ruined. Poor Lord Hartley. I always suspected she was too spirited. They say Lord Ashby boasted of it at White's." Caroline's mother pushed through the crowd, her face pale with horror. "Caroline, come. We must leave, now." But the damage was done. By morning, every drawing room in Mayfair would know that Lady Caroline Whitmore had been publicly rejected for compromising her virtue. The fact that the accusations were entirely false mattered not at all. 3 days later, the Whitmore family departed London for their country estate in Derbyshire. Caroline sat in the carriage, staring at nothing, as the city that had been her home disappeared behind them. "My darling girl," Eleanor said softly, taking her daughter's cold hand, "we know the truth. Your father and I know you have done nothing wrong." Edmund, Earl of Hastings, leaned forward, his weathered face stern, but his eyes compassionate. "Those vipers in London speak without knowledge or conscience. Edward Hartley is a scoundrel and a liar, but we shall weather this storm together, as a family." "I am ruined, Papa," Caroline whispered. "No respectable man will ever—" "Then respectable men are fools," Edmund said firmly. "Any man worthy of you would see through these malicious fabrications. You are innocent, Caroline. Never forget that." But innocence meant little when society had already pronounced its verdict. Thornwood Park, the Whitmore estate in Derbyshire, welcomed them with familiar rolling hills and ancient oak trees. Caroline took refuge in the library, in long walks through the countryside, in anything that kept her from thinking about the life that had been stolen from her. Weeks passed, then months. Summer gave way to autumn, autumn to winter. The letters from London friends, the few who dared to write, confirmed what Caroline already knew. Edward had married Miss Arabella Cunningham in a lavish ceremony at St. George's. The ton had moved on to fresh scandals. Lady Caroline Whitmore was forgotten, a cautionary tale whispered to debutantes about the importance of propriety. She was resigned to a quiet life in the country, to spinsterhood, to slow erosion of hope, until the night the storm came. It was late December when the blizzard struck Derbyshire with unexpected fury. Wind howled around Thornwood Park's stone walls, driving snow against the windows in sheets of white. Caroline sat in the drawing room with her mother, working on embroidery by firelight, when Hodges, their elderly butler, appeared in the doorway. "My lord, my lady," he said, addressing Edmund, who had just entered from his study. "There is a gentleman at the door. His carriage has broken down on the North Road. He requests shelter until the storm passes." "Good heavens, of course," Eleanor said immediately. "Bring him in, Hodges. Such weather is deadly. The gentleman is—" Hodges paused, his normally impassive face showing a flicker of awe. "The Duke of Silverstone, my lord." Caroline's embroidery needle stilled. The Duke of Silverstone. Even in rural Derbyshire, one heard of Richard Leeds, the most powerful nobleman in England, after the Prince Regent himself. Wealthy beyond measure, rumoured to be as cold as ice, and handsome in a way that made dowagers clutch their pearls and debutantes compose terrible poetry. He had never married, despite a title that could have secured him any woman in the kingdom. It was said he trusted no one, loved nothing but power, and had refused every match proposed to him with icy disdain. What was such a man doing on a country road in Derbyshire in the middle of winter? "Show him in," Edmund said, "and prepare the blue guest chamber. He may need to stay until the roads are passable." Caroline stood quickly. "I should retire." "Nonsense," her mother said gently but firmly. "We shall greet our guest together. You have done nothing to be ashamed of, my dear." Moments later, the Duke of Silverstone entered the drawing room, and Caroline understood why London's ladies sighed at the mention of his name. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders beneath a snow-dampened greatcoat that Hodges was helping him remove. His hair was dark, almost black, swept back from a face of severe masculine beauty. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked as though it had forgotten how to smile. But it was his eyes that arrested her, grey as winter skies, intelligent and piercing, missing nothing. Those eyes swept the room and settled on Caroline with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your Grace," Edmund said, bowing, "welcome to Thornwood Park. I am Edmund Whitmore, Earl of Hastings. This is my wife, Lady Hastings, and our daughter, Lady Caroline." The Duke bowed with perfect aristocratic grace. "My lord, ladies, I apologize for imposing upon your hospitality. My carriage lost a wheel 2 miles north. My driver is injured, nothing serious, but your groom has taken him to the stables." "You are most welcome," Eleanor assured him. "Please sit by the fire. You must be frozen through." As the Duke moved toward the fire, Caroline noted the controlled power in his movements, the way he seemed to assess everything with those sharp grey eyes. When he sat, it was with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to owning every room he entered. "You are far from London, Your Grace," Edmund observed, offering brandy which the Duke accepted. "Business in the north?" "I have estates in Yorkshire requiring attention," the Duke replied. His voice was deep, cultured, with an edge of steel beneath the courtesy. "I had hoped to reach the posting inn at Matlock before nightfall. Clearly I underestimated the weather." "Yorkshire estates?" Edmund's eyebrows rose. "Forgive me, but I was under the impression your primary holdings were in Kent and Hampshire." For the first time something flickered in those grey eyes, surprise that Edmund knew his affairs, perhaps, or calculation. "You are well informed, my lord." "I make it my business to know the movements of powerful men," Edmund said with a slight smile, "particularly when they appear unexpectedly in Derbyshire during the worst winter storm in 20 years. The Duke's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "Direct. I appreciate that." His gaze moved to Caroline again, studying her with an attention that made her acutely aware of every aspect of her appearance, her simple grey dress, her hair pinned without elaborate styling, the way she sat slightly apart from her parents as though expecting dismissal. "Your daughter is Lady Caroline Whitmore?" he asked suddenly. The room froze. Caroline's heart began to pound. So he knew. Of course he knew. The scandal had reached even the Duke of Silverstone. "I am," she said quietly, lifting her chin. If he meant to insult her, to leave their home despite the storm, she would face it with dignity. "I see." The Duke set down his brandy glass. "Then I must tell you something, Lady Caroline. The rumours circulating about you in London are false." Caroline stared at him. "Your Grace? Lord Edward Hartley fabricated every accusation against you. There were no meetings with Lord Ashby, who I might add has never set foot in Vauxhall Gardens in his life, as he has been in Scotland for the past year. There was no correspondence, no compromise, no impropriety of any kind." Edmund stood abruptly. "How can you be certain?" The Duke's expression remained impassive. "Because I make it my business to know the truth behind society's lies, Lord Hastings. And because Edward Hartley is a gambler who owed considerable debts that were conveniently forgiven by Arabella Cunningham's father shortly before the Somerset ball." "He sold me," Caroline whispered, the truth crashing over her like icy water. "For money." "He sacrificed your reputation to secure a wealthier match," the Duke confirmed. "Miss Cunningham's father wanted his daughter to marry into the aristocracy. Hartley wanted to escape his creditors. They struck a bargain, and you were the price." Rage bloomed in Caroline's chest, hot and righteous. All these months of shame, of isolation, of believing herself ruined beyond redemption, all of it a lie. A calculated, cruel, mercenary lie. "Why did you not expose this?" Edmund demanded. "If you knew the truth—" "I learned the full truth only recently," the Duke interrupted. "Hartley was careful. But all secrets eventually surface, particularly when one has the resources to uncover them." He stood, his impressive height commanding the room. "Lady Caroline, your reputation can be restored. With the proper evidence presented to the right people, society will know you were the victim of a vicious slander." Hope flickered in Caroline's chest, fragile as candlelight. "You would help me. But why? We are strangers, Your Grace." For a long moment, the Duke said nothing. His grey eyes held hers, and Caroline felt as though he could see into her very soul. Every hurt, every fear, every hidden dream. "Because," he said finally, "injustice offends me, and because I have learned that truth, once buried, has a way of destroying everything it touches unless brought into the light." There was something in his voice, a shadow of old pain, perhaps, that made Caroline wonder what truths the Duke of Silverstone carried. "The roads will not be passable for at least 2 days," Edmund said slowly. "You are welcome to remain at Thornwood Park, Your Grace. And if you are sincere in your offer to help my daughter, we would be grateful beyond measure." The Duke inclined his head. "Then I shall remain. And Lady Caroline—" He looked at her once more, and this time something almost like warmth touched those winter-grey eyes. "I give you my word. Before I am finished, London will remember your name not as a scandal, but as the lady who was wronged and vindicated." As Hodges led the Duke to his chambers, Caroline stood motionless, her mind spinning. The most powerful man in England had appeared like a figure from a fairy tale, though she knew better than to believe in such things, and promised to restore everything she had lost. But as she climbed the stairs to her own room that night, she could not shake the memory of those grey eyes, or the strange feeling that the Duke of Silverstone's arrival at Thornwood Park was not quite the accident he claimed. Fate, she had learned, was rarely so convenient, and men like Richard Leeds, Duke of Silverstone, did nothing without purpose. The storm raged for 3 days, transforming Derbyshire into a landscape of white silence. Snow piled against Thornwood Park's walls, sealing the estate from the world. Inside, fires blazed in every hearth, and an unlikely companionship began to form. Caroline had expected the Duke of Silverstone to be cold, arrogant, perhaps barely tolerant of country society. Instead, she discovered a man of unexpected depths. On the first morning after his arrival, she found him in her father's library, reading a volume of Wordsworth with the concentration of a scholar. "Your Grace," she said from the doorway, uncertain whether to intrude. "I did not mean to disturb you." He looked up, and for a moment she saw surprise cross his features, as though he, too, had not expected to be discovered in such a human occupation. "Lady Caroline, please come in. This is your home, not mine." She entered slowly, drawn by curiosity. "I would not have taken you for a reader of poetry." "Why? Because dukes are expected to concern themselves only with politics and port?" A hint of dry humour touched his voice. "I assure you, Lady Caroline, even men of power occasionally seek beauty in words." Caroline moved to the window, looking out at the snow-shrouded gardens. "What brought you here, truly? And please do not tell me it was Yorkshire estates. My father was correct. You have no significant holdings in the north." Silence stretched between them. When the Duke finally spoke, his voice was careful. "I came because I heard you were in Derbyshire, because I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." She turned to face him. "And what did you conclude? That you are innocent, that you have been gravely wronged, and that—" he paused, seeming to choose his words with unusual care, "that the woman I see before me bears no resemblance to the scandalous creature London's gossips describe. You did not know me in London." "No, but I observed you. At balls, at the opera, at Almack's." His grey eyes held hers steadily. "You were always kind to those beneath your station. You danced with the awkward younger sons other ladies ignored. You never simpered or schemed or played the games so many debutantes employ. I found it refreshing." Caroline's breath caught. "You observed me." Something flickered across his face, an emotion gone too quickly to name. "I observe everyone, Lady Caroline. It is both my gift and my curse." Before she could respond, her mother appeared in the doorway. "Caroline, darling, would you help me with—" "Oh, Your Grace, forgive me." "Not at all, Lady Hastings." The Duke stood with fluid grace. "I was just departing for a walk. The storm has abated somewhat." He left before Caroline could say another word, but his presence seemed to linger in the library long after he had gone. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Edmund broached the subject that had been haunting them all. "Your Grace," he said, carving the roast with deliberate precision, "you mentioned evidence against Hartley. What form does this evidence take?" The Duke set down his wine-glass. "Letters, primarily. Correspondence between Hartley and Cunningham's father, discussing the terms of their arrangement. Also witness testimony from Hartley's valet, who was present when the plot was hatched." "And you obtained these how?" Caroline asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Those grey eyes met hers with something like approval. "I have investigators in my employ, men skilled at uncovering information. Others wish to remain hidden. When I heard of your situation, I set them to work." "But why?" Caroline pressed. "Why expend such effort for a woman you do not know?" The Duke was silent for a long moment. The firelight cast shadows across his severe features, making him look almost haunted. "Because 7 years ago," he said quietly, "my sister was similarly destroyed by false accusations. She was engaged to a viscount who decided he preferred another match. He spread lies about her character, about her virtue. The Ton believed him. My sister Charlotte could not bear the shame. She took her own life 6 months after the scandal broke." Horror washed over Caroline. "Your Grace, I am so sorry. I was in India at the time, managing family holdings. By the time I returned, she was gone." His voice was flat, controlled, but Caroline could hear the grief beneath. "I spent 2 years destroying the man who destroyed her. He lost his fortune, his title, his standing, but it changed nothing. Charlotte was still dead." Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. "How terrible. I cannot imagine." "When I learned of your situation, Lady Caroline," the Duke continued, his gaze fixed on her, "I saw my sister. Another innocent woman sacrificed on the altar of masculine greed and social climbing. I swore after Charlotte's death that I would never again stand by while such injustice occurred." Understanding flooded through Caroline. "So this is about your sister, about redemption. Perhaps—" the Duke's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Or perhaps I have simply discovered that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of personal connection." Edmund cleared his throat. "Whatever your motivations, Your Grace, we are grateful. What do you propose?" "I shall return to London after Twelfth Night. I will present the evidence to several key members of the Ton, those whose opinions shape society's judgments. Lady Carlisle, for instance, the Duchess of Beaumont, Lord Fairfax. Once they know the truth, others will follow. And Hartley." Caroline's voice was hard. "What of him? He will face the consequences of his actions." The Duke's smile was cold. "I can be quite persuasive when circumstances require." Over the following days, as snow continued to blanket Derbyshire, Caroline and the Duke fell into an unexpected pattern. They walked in the cleared garden paths, discussing everything from Shakespeare to agricultural reform. They played chess in the evenings. He won consistently, but she improved with each game. They argued about poetry, about politics, about the proper way to train hunting dogs. And slowly, Caroline began to see beneath the Duke's intimidating exterior. One afternoon she found him in the stables, examining her father's horses with an expert eye. "You care for animals," she observed. "I find them more honest than most people." He ran a hand along a chestnut mare's flank with surprising gentleness. "They do not dissemble or betray. If a horse trusts you, it is because you have earned that trust through consistent action." "Is that why you never married?" The words escaped before Caroline could stop them. "Because you do not trust people?" He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his expression. "I never married because I watched my father break my mother's heart with his infidelities. Because I saw how society treats women as commodities to be traded for advantage. Because I decided long ago that I would not bind any woman to a man as damaged as myself." "Damaged?" Caroline stepped closer. "Your Grace, Richard, you are the least damaged man I have ever met. You are honorable, intelligent, kind." "I am cold," he interrupted, his voice rough. "I am calculating. I use people as chess pieces to achieve my objectives. Ask anyone in London. The Duke of Silverstone has ice water in his veins and no heart at all." "Then they do not know you as I do." The words hung between them in the stable's warm dimness. The Duke stared at her, something fierce and desperate warring in his grey eyes. "Caroline," he said, and her name on his lips sent warmth cascading through her. "You should not. We should not." "Should not what? Speak honestly? Recognize what is growing between us?" "I came here to help you restore your reputation, not to compromise it further by—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "By caring for me?" Caroline finished softly. "Is that so terrible?" "Yes." The word was harsh. "Because I am not a man who loves easily or well. Because I have built walls so high around my heart that I do not know if they can be breached. Because you deserve better than a duke who has forgotten how to feel anything beyond rage and retribution." Caroline reached out, touching his hand where it rested on the mare's neck. He flinched, but did not pull away. "Perhaps," she said gently, "you have not forgotten. Perhaps you simply need someone to remind you." For a moment, the Duke's control wavered. His hand turned beneath hers, fingers intertwining, holding on as though she were an anchor in a storm. Then he released her and stepped back, his expression shuddering once more. "I leave for London in 3 days," he said formally. "I will send word when the evidence has been presented." He walked away, leaving Caroline alone with the horses and the growing certainty that she was falling in love with a man who believed himself incapable of love in return. On the eve of his departure, Caroline could not sleep. She descended to the library near midnight, seeking solace in books, only to find the Duke already there, staring into the dying fire. "Your Grace," she said softly, "I did not expect—" "I could not sleep either." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit with me, Caroline, just for a moment." She sat, and for a long time they simply existed together in comfortable silence. Finally, the Duke spoke. "After Charlotte died, I promised myself I would never again allow anyone close enough to hurt me. It seemed the safest course, the most logical. And now I find that safety is a cold companion." He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her heart ache. "You have disrupted all my careful plans, Lady Caroline Whitmore. You have made me feel things I thought dead and buried with my sister. Is that so terrible?" "It is terrifying." He reached out, cupping her face with one hand, his touch reverent. "Because I find that I am not here merely to restore your reputation. I am here because I cannot imagine a future in which you are not part of my life." Caroline's breath caught. "Richard, but I am not a man who speaks of love easily. I do not know if what I feel is love or merely need. The need to protect, to possess, to keep you safe from a world that has hurt you. And if I said I do not need protection, that what I need is a partner, an equal, someone who sees me as I truly am." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half groan. "Then I would say you are asking me to be someone I do not know how to be. Then learn." Caroline leaned into his touch. "We shall learn together." For one perfect suspended moment, Caroline thought he might kiss her. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, his eyes darkened with longing, his breath mingled with hers. And then he pulled away, standing abruptly. "I leave at dawn," he said, his voice strained. "I will write to you from London." He was gone before Caroline could respond, leaving her alone with the dying fire and the echo of words unspoken. The Duke of Silverstone departed Thornwood Park as the winter sun rose over snow-covered hills. Caroline watched from her window as his repaired carriage rolled down the drive, carrying away the man who had somehow, impossibly, made her believe in hope again. "He cares for you," Eleanor said softly from the doorway. "I have never seen the Duke of Silverstone look at anyone the way he looks at you." "Then why did he leave?" "Because men like Richard Leeds do not trust happiness when it arrives. They expect it to be snatched away." Her mother moved to stand beside her. "Give him time, my darling. If he is the man I believe him to be, he will return." But as January stretched into February with no word from London, Caroline began to wonder if the Duke of Silverstone had decided that safety was preferable to risk after all. Until the letter arrived. "Lady Caroline, the evidence has been presented. Society is in an uproar. Lady Carlisle has declared you unjustly wronged. The Duchess of Beaumont has cut Lord Hartley at every opportunity. Lord Fairfax has called him a scoundrel and a liar in whites, where all could hear. Your reputation is not merely restored, it is elevated. You are now seen as a victim of cruel machinations, a lady of virtue who suffered unjustly. London awaits your return, and I await the answer to a question I should have asked before I left Derbyshire. Will you grant me the honour of calling upon you? Not as your champion or your saviour, but as a man who has discovered, against all odds and reason, that his frozen heart is capable of warmth after all. If you will have me, Caroline, if you can accept a duke who is still learning how to love, but who is certain beyond doubt that you are worth the risk of trying. Yours, Richard." Caroline read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she called for paper and ink and wrote a single word in reply. Yes. London in the spring of 1819 was a city transformed, or perhaps it was Caroline who had transformed, returning to the ballrooms and drawing rooms that had once been her domain, with new eyes and a heart no longer broken. The journey from Derbyshire had taken 3 days, and with each mile that brought her closer to the capital, Caroline's anticipation grew. The Duke's letter had been followed by 2 more, each slightly less formal than the last, as though Richard was gradually lowering the walls he had built around himself. "I find myself counting the days until your arrival, like a schoolboy awaiting holiday," he had written. "This is a most disconcerting sensation for a man who prides himself on emotional control. You have much to answer for, Lady Caroline." Now, as the Whitmore carriage rolled through Mayfair toward their London townhouse on Grosvenor Square, Caroline pressed her hand against the window, searching the familiar streets for a glimpse of a tall figure in dark coat and severe features. "He will call this evening," her mother assured her, reading her thoughts with maternal accuracy. "Give the poor man time to learn you have arrived." But Eleanor was wrong. The Duke of Silverstone was already there. He stood on the steps of Whitmore House as their carriage drew up, dressed impeccably in midnight blue superfine, his dark hair swept back, his grey eyes fixed on the carriage door, with an intensity that made Caroline's heart stumble. "Heavens," Edmund muttered. "The man has no subtlety whatsoever." "I think it is romantic," Eleanor countered. The footman opened the carriage door. Richard stepped forward immediately, extending his hand to assist Caroline down. When her fingers touched his, even through their gloves, she felt the connection arc between them like lightning. "Lady Caroline," he said, his voice low and rough, "welcome home, Your Grace." She smiled up at him, noting the way his stern features softened when he looked at her. "This is most unexpected. I have discovered that where you are concerned, I am no longer capable of patience." He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm, his movements possessive. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Interminable," she replied honestly, but improved considerably by the knowledge of what awaited at its end. Something fierce and triumphant flashed in his eyes. "Then you received my letters?" "I did. All 3 of them. There would have been more, but I feared appearing desperate." A hint of self-deprecation touched his mouth, not quite a smile, but close. "Though I suspect that particular battle is already lost." As her parents entered the house, making polite excuses about travel fatigue, Richard drew Caroline aside into the small garden behind the townhouse. Roses were beginning to bloom, filling the air with sweetness. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. I left Derbyshire like a coward, afraid of what I was feeling, afraid of failing you, of proving as incapable of love as I feared. And now? Now I am still afraid. His honesty was stark, unadorned. But I have learned that some fears are worth facing. You are worth facing every fear I possess, Caroline. She reached up, touching his face, feeling the sharp line of his jaw beneath her palm. I am afraid too. Afraid of trusting again, of believing in happiness only to have it torn away. Then we shall be afraid together. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it closer. And perhaps in time, we shall teach each other courage. Richard, let me say this before I lose my nerve. He took both her hands in his, and Caroline realized with shock that they were trembling. I am not a romantic man. I do not know how to speak of love in flowery language or grand gestures. But I know that when you left Derbyshire, it felt as though winter had returned. I know that your letters were the only thing that brought warmth to my days. I know that I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to make you smile the way you smiled at me in the stables, as though I were not a duke at all, but simply a man worth knowing. Tears pricked Caroline's eyes. That is quite romantic enough for me. There is more. He drew a breath, and Caroline saw the vulnerability in his expression, the courage it took for a man like Richard Leeds to open his heart. I am going to restore your reputation completely. Within a month, London will remember the scandal only as a testament to Hartley's villainy and your virtue. But I do not want to do this as your champion or your protector. I want to do it as your husband. Caroline's breath stopped. Richard? He released one of her hands to reach into his coat, withdrawing a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the stone the exact color of her eyes. Lady Caroline Whitmore, he said, and his voice was steady despite the emotion blazing in his eyes. Will you marry me? Will you accept a duke who is still learning to feel, but who is certain beyond all doubt that he wants to spend his life learning with you? Joy burst through Caroline's chest, bright and overwhelming. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The kiss he gave her was nothing like the chaste salutes exchanged at society betrothals. It was fierce and tender at once, claiming and cherishing, the kiss of a man who had finally allowed himself to want something beyond power and retribution. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Richard rested his forehead against hers. I will not fail you, he vowed. I swear it, Caroline. You could not possibly, she replied, because you have already given me something I thought lost forever, the courage to hope. The announcement of their engagement appeared in the Morning Post the following day, sending shockwaves through London society. The Duke of Silverstone and Lady Caroline Whitmore. The Duke of Silverstone is pleased to announce his betrothal to Lady Caroline Whitmore, daughter of the Earl of Hastings. The wedding will take place at St. George's, Hanover Square, at the end of the season. In drawing rooms across Mayfair, reactions varied from astonishment to calculation. The Duke of Silverstone engaged? I never thought to see the day, Lady Carlisle remarked to her intimates, and to Lady Caroline no less, the poor dear who was so viciously slandered by that wretch Hartley. I always said there was more to that scandal than met the eye, the Duchess of Beaumont declared, conveniently forgetting that she had been among the first to cut Caroline after the Somerset ball. Lady Caroline is a gem. The Duke shows excellent judgment. But it was Lord Edward Hartley's reaction that provided the most satisfaction. He was at White's attempting to restore his own tattered reputation, for the truth about his bargain with Arabella's father had indeed spread through society like wildfire, when news of the engagement reached him. Silverstone engaged to her. His face went white, then red. That is impossible. She is ruined, disgraced. Actually, Lord Fairfax interrupted coldly, she is about to become the Duchess of Silverstone, which makes her one of the most powerful women in England, while you, Hartley, are a penniless fortune hunter, married to a woman who despises him. For Arabella, Hartley née Cunningham had discovered too late that she had married a gambler and a liar. The fortune her father had provided was already half spent, and her husband's affections, if they had ever existed, had vanished entirely. The Duke will destroy him, someone whispered. Silverstone never forgives. They were correct. Within weeks, Edward Hartley found himself ostracized from every club, every ball, every gathering of consequence. His debts were called in. His credit was refused. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Liar, schemer, the man who sold his honor for gold. The Duke of Silverstone said nothing publicly, merely raised one dark eyebrow when Hartley's name was mentioned in his presence, but everyone understood. This was retribution, precise and implacable. Caroline, to her credit, felt no satisfaction in Hartley's downfall. "He has made his own bed," she told Richard one evening as they walked in Hyde Park, her hand tucked in his arm. "I do not need him destroyed to feel vindicated." "Perhaps not," Richard replied, "but I require it. He hurt you, Caroline, that I cannot, will not, forgive." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "Then forgive for my sake. I do not want our marriage to begin with vengeance in your heart. What was done to me was terrible, but I have already won the only victory that matters." "And what is that?" "You." She smiled up at him. "I have you, Richard. Hartley took my reputation, but you gave me something far more valuable, proof that love can exist even in the coldest heart if the right person is patient enough to wait for spring." Something shifted in Richard's expression. The hardness that had lived in his eyes since Charlotte's death softened, replaced by tenderness so profound it made Caroline's throat tight. "How did I ever deserve you?" he murmured. "You did not deserve me. You earned me." She rose on tiptoes, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "Now come. We have a ball to attend, and I wish to dance with my betrothed where all of London can see." The ball at Beaumont House was the event of the season. Every member of the ton who could secure an invitation attended, eager to witness the Duke of Silverstone's first public appearance with his betrothed. Caroline wore a gown of deep sapphire silk that matched her engagement ring, her dark hair dressed with diamond pins. As she entered the ballroom on Richard's arm, conversation ceased. Every eye turned toward them. "They are staring," Caroline whispered. "Let them stare." Richard's hand tightened on hers. "They are witnessing the moment the Duke of Silverstone became the most fortunate man in England." The orchestra struck up a waltz. Richard led her onto the floor, and as they began to dance, Caroline felt the past year's pain finally begin to dissolve. "You dance beautifully," she observed. "I'm accomplished in many things," he replied with the faintest hint of humor, "though I confess I have never enjoyed dancing until now." "Why now?" "Because you are in my arms." His grey eyes held hers with such intensity that Caroline forgot they were surrounded by hundreds of watching aristocrats. "Because every moment with you feels like coming home after a lifetime of exile." The waltz ended too soon. As Richard escorted Caroline from the floor, they were immediately surrounded by well-wishers, some genuine, others merely curious. Lady Carlisle embraced Caroline warmly. "My dear, I'm so delighted for you. The Duke is a fine man, and you deserve every happiness." The Duchess of Beaumont was equally effusive. "We must have you both to dinner soon. I insist upon hearing how this romance developed." Even the Prince Regent himself, in attendance for the evening, expressed his approval. "Silverstone, you sly dog. I had given up hope of you ever settling down. Lady Caroline, you must possess remarkable qualities to have captured such an elusive prize." But it was a quiet moment near the end of the evening that meant the most to Caroline. She and Richard had retreated to the terrace for air when they encountered Lord Christopher Ashby, the man Edward had falsely accused Caroline of conducting an affair with. "Your Grace, Lady Caroline," Ashby said, bowing deeply. "I must apologize for the pain my name caused you, my lady, though I was entirely ignorant of its misuse until recently." "You bear no responsibility for Hartley's lies," Caroline assured him. "Nevertheless, I am relieved to see you restored to society's good graces." Ashby hesitated, then added, "I am also recently returned from Scotland, where I have been courting my now betrothed. Had I been in London last year, I would have immediately refuted Hartley's claims. I am sorry I was not here to defend you." "You are here now," Richard said quietly, "and your testimony was instrumental in revealing the truth. For that, you have my gratitude." After Ashby departed, Caroline leaned against the terrace balustrade, looking out over the torchlit gardens. "Do you know what the best part of tonight has been?" "What?" "Not the vindication or the apologies or the restoration of my reputation." She turned to Richard, taking his hands in hers. "The best part has been watching you smile. Really smile, without shadows in your eyes. You are happy, Richard, and that makes everything else worthwhile." He pulled her close, heedless of propriety or watching eyes. "I am happy," he admitted, as though the words were foreign on his tongue. "For the first time since Charlotte died, I am happy. You have given me that gift, Caroline, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it." The wedding was set for June, but there was one more obstacle to overcome before Caroline and Richard could begin their life together. 3 weeks before the ceremony, a letter arrived at Whitmore House. Caroline recognized the handwriting immediately. Arabella Hartley. "Lady Caroline, I write to beg your forgiveness, though I know I deserve none. I was aware of my father's arrangement with Edward. I knew he planned to ruin you publicly, and I did nothing to stop it, because I was selfish, desperate to secure a title, and convinced that one ruined reputation mattered little in the grand scheme of my own happiness. I have been punished for my complicity. Edward is a cruel husband who cares nothing for me beyond my fortune, which he has already nearly exhausted. But more than that, I am punished by my own conscience. Every day I remember what we did to you, an innocent woman destroyed for our advancement. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I felt you should know that justice of a sort has been served, and that I am deeply, profoundly sorry." Arabella Hartley Caroline read the letter twice, then brought it to Richard. "What would you have me do?" she asked. He considered the question carefully. "What does your heart tell you? That she is as much a victim as I was, trapped by societal expectations, by a father's ambitions, by the limited choices available to women, that holding on to anger serves no purpose. Then respond with grace," Richard advised. "You have already proven yourself the better person, Caroline. Continue to do so." Caroline wrote a brief reply. "Mrs. Hartley, I accept your apology, though I cannot say I forgive easily. What was done to me was cruel, but I recognize that you too have suffered consequences. I hope you find peace and, eventually, a way out of the unhappiness you have made for yourself. I wish you well. Lady Caroline Whitmore." When she showed the letter to Richard, he smiled, one of those rare, genuine smiles that transformed his severe features. "You are a better person than I am," he said. "No, I am simply a person who has learned that bitterness is a prison, and forgiveness is the key." She touched his face gently. "You taught me that, Richard. You who had every reason to remain angry forever, but chose instead to help a stranger. You showed me that the past does not have to define the future." He kissed her then, soft and reverent. "I love you, Caroline Whitmore. I do not say it often. I am still learning the words, but I feel it in every moment, in every breath. You have saved me from a life of cold vengeance and given me something I never thought possible, hope for a future worth living." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "My Duke, my Richard, the man who saw me when I was invisible and loved me when I thought myself unlovable." The morning of Caroline's wedding dawned clear and golden, London spring at its finest. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Whitmore House as Eleanor helped her daughter into her wedding gown, ivory silk embroidered with seed pearls, elegant without ostentation. "You are beautiful," Eleanor said, tears glistening in her eyes. "The most beautiful bride I've ever seen." Caroline touched the sapphire pendant at her throat, Richard's wedding gift, delivered that morning with a note in his precise handwriting. "Something blue to match your eyes and remind you that even on the greyest days beauty persists. I shall see you at the altar, my heart." "Are you nervous?" her mother asked. "No." Caroline's reflection smiled back at her from the mirror, serene and certain. "I am not nervous at all. How can I be when I am marrying the man who taught me that endings can become beginnings?" St. George's Church in Hanover Square was filled to capacity. All of London society had come to witness the wedding of the Duke of Silverstone, the capital's most confirmed bachelor, to the woman whose scandal had been transformed into society's greatest romance. But Caroline saw none of the watching faces as Edmund escorted her down the aisle. Her entire focus was fixed on the man waiting at the altar. Richard stood tall and imposing in midnight blue superfine, his dark hair swept back, his grey eyes locked on her with such fierce devotion that Caroline's breath caught. This was not the cold, remote Duke of Silverstone that London knew. This was her Richard, the man who read poetry in secret, who gentled horses with patient hands, who had learned to love despite believing himself incapable. As Edmund placed her hand in Richard's, her father whispered, "Take care of my daughter, Your Grace." "With my life," Richard replied, his voice steady. "With everything I am." The ceremony passed in a blur of candlelight and ancient words. Caroline heard herself make her vows, heard Richard's deep voice promising to love and cherish until death parted them. And then the Archbishop was pronouncing them husband and wife, and Richard was lifting her veil with hands that trembled slightly. "My Duchess," he murmured, for her ears alone. "My Caroline." The kiss he gave her was tender, restrained by propriety and watching eyes, but Caroline felt the promise in it, of passion and devotion, of nights yet to come when they would be alone. As they emerged from the church into sunshine and cheering crowds, Caroline felt the final weight of the past year lift from her shoulders. She was no longer Lady Caroline Whitmore, the woman ruined by scandal. She was Caroline Leeds, Duchess of Silverstone. And more importantly, she was simply Caroline, beloved wife of the man at her side. The wedding breakfast at Silverstone House was a magnificent affair. The Duke's London residence was a palatial mansion in Grosvenor Square, and Richard had spared no expense in celebrating their union, but it was the quieter moments Caroline treasured most. During the toasts, her father stood and addressed the assembly. "Your Grace, Richard, when you first appeared at Thornwood Park in the midst of that storm, I confess I was suspicious of your motives. But I have learned that you are a man of rare honor. You have restored my daughter's reputation, yes, but more than that, you have restored her happiness. For that you have my eternal gratitude and my deepest respect." Richard inclined his head, visibly moved. "Lord Hastings, I am the one who should be grateful. Your daughter has given me something I thought lost forever, the ability to feel joy." Later, as the celebration continued, Lord Fairfax approached Caroline with a knowing smile. "Your Grace, I suppose I must use your new title now. I wanted to tell you something. The Duke began investigating Hartley's treachery within days of your scandal. He spent a fortune hiring investigators, tracking down witnesses, compiling evidence, all before he ever met you. He did it simply because he believed an injustice had been committed." Caroline's eyes found Richard across the room, where he stood conversing with her father. "He told me it was about his sister." "It was, but it was also about you, even then." Fairfax's expression was gentle. "Richard Leeds has never done anything without purpose. He came to Derbyshire because he wanted to meet the woman he had already decided to save. What he did not expect was to fall in love with her." The revelation warmed Caroline from within. Richard had chosen her before he even knew her, not out of pity but out of recognition. He had seen something in her that called to something in him, and he had answered that call with characteristic determination. As evening fell and the last guests departed, Richard led Caroline through Silverstone House, showing her the home that would now be hers. "The Duchess's apartments are here," he said, opening a door to reveal a suite of elegant rooms decorated in shades of blue and cream. "But I confess, I hope you will not spend much time in them." "Oh?" Caroline raised an eyebrow. "And why is that, Your Grace?" "Because the Duke's apartments are just through that door." He nodded toward a connecting entrance. "And I have grown accustomed to your company. I find I do not sleep well when you are not near." Caroline's heart swelled. "Then I shall endeavor to remain close." He pulled her against him, and the restraint that had marked his earlier kiss vanished. This kiss was deep, claiming, full of promise and barely leashed desire. "I love you," he said when they broke apart, both breathing hard. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, Caroline. Not for your beauty or your kindness or the way you challenge me, though all those things are true. I love you because you saw the man beneath the title, the heart beneath the ice. You loved me before I learned to love myself. And I love you," Caroline whispered, tears streaming freely now, "for your honor, your strength, your courage in allowing yourself to feel again. You are not damaged, Richard. You are beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful soul I have ever known." He gathered her close, and they stood together in the fading light, two people who had found each other across scandal and grief, who had learned that love was not a weakness, but the greatest strength of all. The weeks following the wedding were a revelation for both of them. Richard proved an attentive husband, surprising Caroline with his capacity for tenderness. He brought her tea in the mornings, reading the papers aloud and commenting on political affairs with the dry wit she had come to cherish. He took her riding in Hyde Park, indifferent to the curious stares of society. He hosted dinners where Caroline's intelligence was not merely tolerated, but celebrated. And at night, in the privacy of their chambers, the Duke of Silverstone became simply Richard, a man learning to express love not just in words, but in touch, in whispered confessions, in the ways he held her as though she were precious beyond measure. "I never thought I could be this happy," he admitted one evening as they lay together, moonlight streaming through the windows. "After Charlotte died, I believed happiness was something that happened to other people, not to me." Caroline traced the line of his jaw, feeling the slight roughness of evening beard. "And now? Now I understand that happiness is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose, every day, when you wake beside the person who makes you want to be better than you are." 1 month after their wedding, Caroline discovered she was with child. She told Richard in the library, the room where they had first begun to truly know each other at Thornwood Park, the room that had become their sanctuary in London as well. "I have news," she said, unable to contain her smile. Richard looked up from his correspondence, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "We are going to have a child. In February, the physician believes." For a moment, Richard simply stared at her. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "A child," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Our child. Are you pleased?" He pulled back to look at her, and Caroline saw tears glistening in those grey eyes. "Pleased? Caroline, I do not have words. After so much loss, so much grief, to be given this gift," his voice broke, "a family, a future. You have given me everything." "We have given each other everything," she corrected gently. "This child is the product of our love, Richard, proof that even from scandal and sorrow, beautiful things can grow." The pregnancy was easy, and as Caroline's body changed, Richard became even more protective. He insisted she rest frequently, cancelled social engagements when she was tired, and personally supervised Cook's preparation of every meal to ensure it met the physician's recommendations. "You are smothering me," Caroline informed him one afternoon, though her tone was affectionate rather than annoyed. "I am caring for you," Richard corrected. "There is a difference. Richard, I am not made of glass. I can still walk in the garden, attend the occasional ball." "Absolutely not." His expression was implacable. "Dr. Harrison said you should avoid exertion. He said I should avoid excessive exertion. There is nothing excessive about a walk or a single dance." They compromised, as they often did now, having learned the art of marriage through trial and gentle error. Caroline attended carefully selected events, while Richard hovered nearby like a particularly devoted shadow. Edmund and Eleanor were frequent visitors, delighted by the prospect of becoming grandparents. Eleanor brought baby clothes she had saved from Caroline's infancy. Edmund presented Richard with a treatise on fatherhood written by some earnest Victorian moralist, which Richard read with endearing seriousness. "It says here that a father should be both firm and affectionate," Richard reported one evening. "You are already both those things," Caroline assured him. "But with a child, Caroline, I do not know how to be a father. My own father was distant, often cruel. Then you will be different." She took his hand, placing it on the swell of her stomach where their child grew. "You will be the father you needed when you were young, patient, kind, present. I have no doubt of it." One afternoon in early December, an unexpected visitor arrived at Silverstone House. Arabella Hartley, thin, pale, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, stood in the entrance hall, twisting her hands nervously. "Your Grace," she said when Caroline appeared, "I apologize for calling unannounced. I understand if you refuse to see me." Caroline hesitated, then gestured to the drawing room. "Come, we can speak privately." Once seated, Arabella burst into tears. "I am leaving Edward. My father has finally acknowledged what a terrible mistake we made. He is providing me an allowance so I can live independently." "I am glad," Caroline said sincerely. "No woman should remain in an unhappy marriage." "I wanted to thank you," Arabella continued through her tears, "for responding to my letter, for not condemning me entirely. You had every right to refuse any contact, but you showed me grace I did not deserve. We all make mistakes, Mrs. Hartley, some more serious than others, but mistakes nonetheless." Caroline poured tea with steady hands. The question is what we do afterward. Do we compound our errors, or do we learn and grow? I want to grow. I want to be better. Arabella accepted the teacup with trembling hands. I'm going to live with my aunt in Bath. Perhaps there, away from London, I can become someone worth respecting. Then I wish you well in that endeavour. Caroline's voice was kind but firm. What happened between us cannot be undone, but it can be forgiven if you truly commit to change. After Arabella left, Richard found Caroline in the drawing room, staring thoughtfully into the fire. Should I have her removed from the visitors' list? He asked, having been informed of the call by the butler. No. Caroline looked up at him, serene. She is taking responsibility for her actions. That takes courage. I will not punish courage, even when it comes late. Richard sat beside her, pulling her close. You are extraordinary, do you know that? Most women would cling to their anger. Anger is exhausting, and I have too much happiness to waste energy on bitterness. She leaned against his shoulder. Besides, our child deserves to be born into a world where forgiveness is possible. I want to model that from the very beginning. February arrived with unseasonable warmth and a profusion of early crocuses in Hyde Park. Caroline's labour began on a Tuesday morning, and Richard, who had remained calm through political crises and financial disasters, became utterly undone. The physician is on his way, he informed Caroline for the third time in as many minutes. Your mother has been sent for. The midwife is preparing the birthing chamber. Is there anything else you need, anything at all? Richard. Caroline caught his hand between contractions. Breathe. I am well. Women have been doing this since the dawn of time. But not my woman, not the most important person in my world. The labour was long, nearly 20 hours, and Richard refused to leave. He stayed by Caroline's side despite the scandalized protests of the midwife, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement when the pain grew too intense. You are so strong, he murmured during the worst of it. The strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love. And then, as winter twilight fell over London, their daughter was born. A tiny, perfect creature with dark hair and her mother's delicate features. A girl, the midwife announced, placing the baby in Caroline's arms. Healthy and beautiful. Richard stared at the child, his daughter, with an expression of such profound wonder that Caroline felt her heart might burst. She is perfect, he whispered. Caroline, she is absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold her? He hesitated, fear flickering across his face. What if I hurt her? I have never... You will not hurt her. Caroline guided the baby into his arms. See? She knows her papa already. Richard held his daughter with infinite care, one large hand cradling her tiny head. Tears streamed unashamedly down his face. Hello, little one, he said softly. I am your father, and I promise you this. I will protect you, guide you, love you every day of your life. You will never doubt your worth. You will never question whether you are cherished, because you are. You are loved beyond measure, little Charlotte. Caroline's breath caught. Charlotte? After my sister, Richard confirmed, looking up at her with luminous eyes, so that her name is associated not with tragedy, but with joy, with new beginnings, with hope. Charlotte Eleanor Leeds, Caroline said, including her mother's name. It is perfect. The christening took place 6 weeks later at St. George's, with all of London society in attendance. Edmund and Eleanor stood as godparents, beaming with pride as the Archbishop blessed their granddaughter. At the celebration afterward, Caroline watched Richard with their daughter and felt overwhelming gratitude. He was a natural father, patient, attentive, absolutely besotted. He personally oversaw every detail of Charlotte's care, from the nursery's temperature to the credentials of every servant who came near her. You have created a monster, Eleanor teased. I have never seen a duke so involved in nursery matters. He is devoted, Caroline agreed, watching Richard rock Charlotte gently while discussing estate matters with Lord Fairfax. I think he needed this, to have someone small and helpless depend on him entirely. It has healed something in him that I could not reach. As the celebration continued, Caroline found herself on the terrace, needing a moment of quiet. Richard joined her there, Charlotte asleep against his shoulder. Are you well? He asked. Not too tired? I am perfect. She leaned against him. the three of them together beneath the stars. I was just thinking about how much has changed in 2 years. From scandal and ruin to this, a husband I adore, a daughter I love beyond reason, a life I never thought possible. I was thinking something similar, Richard admitted. How one chance encounter, one winter storm, changed everything. If I had not gone to Derbyshire that night. But you did go, and we found each other. Caroline touched his face gently. I do not believe in fate, Richard, but I believe in choice. You chose to help me. I chose to trust you. We chose to love each other, despite all the reasons we could have protected our hearts instead. Best choice I ever made, he murmured against her hair. Charlotte stirred in his arms, making small sounds of contentment. Richard adjusted his hold, his movements practiced now, confident. What do you think she will be when she grows up? Caroline wondered. Strong, intelligent, kind like her mother. Richard smiled, one of those genuine smiles that still surprised her with their beauty, and loved. Above all else, she will know she is loved. 3 years passed in happy succession. Charlotte grew into a bright, curious child, with her father's grey eyes and her mother's warm heart. And then, on a crisp autumn morning, their son was born, Edmund Richard Leeds, named for both grandfathers. The Silverstone House nursery echoed with laughter and life. Richard proved equally devoted to his son, though Edmund's arrival brought new challenges. He cries more than Charlotte did, Richard observed one night, walking the floor with a squalling Edmund against his shoulder. He is testing his lungs, Caroline said from the bed where she was feeding a very alert Charlotte. The physician says he is perfectly healthy. He has extraordinary lungs, Richard muttered, but his expression was tender as he looked down at his son. Charlotte, now 3, was fascinated by her baby brother. She insisted on helping with everything, from choosing his clothes to singing him lullabies in a piping, off-key voice that somehow always soothed him. She will be a wonderful sister, Eleanor predicted during one of her visits. She already is, Caroline agreed, watching Richard settle both children for their afternoon nap, reading to them in that deep, calm voice that never failed to enchant. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Richard arranged a private dinner in the Silverstone House conservatory. Candles floated in the fountain, flowers bloomed despite the winter cold outside, and the stars shone through the glass ceiling. This is beautiful, Caroline breathed. Not as beautiful as you. Richard pulled out her chair, then took his own seat across from her. 5 years ago today, you became my Duchess. The best decision I have ever made was placing that ring on your finger. The best decision we ever made, Caroline corrected. Marriage is not one person's choice, Richard. It is a daily commitment we both make. True. He reached across the table, taking her hand. And I choose you, Caroline. Every day, every moment. When I wake beside you, when I watch you with our children, when you challenge me, support me, love me despite my faults, I choose you, and I choose you. Tears glistened in her eyes. My Duke, my husband, my love. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. They talked long into the night, remembering their journey, the scandal, the storm, the gradual falling in love, the wedding, the children. So much had changed since that spring ball at Somerset House, where Caroline's world had shattered. Do you ever think about Edward Hartley? Richard asked suddenly. Caroline considered. Sometimes. Mostly I feel pity. He traded integrity for gold, and ended up with neither. I heard he and Arabella separated permanently. She lives in Bath now, doing charitable work. He lives I do not know where, nor do I care to. He destroyed his own life through greed and cruelty, Richard observed. While you transformed your tragedy into triumph. That is the difference between you. We transformed it, Caroline corrected. I could not have done it alone, Richard. You gave me the courage to hope again. And you gave me the ability to love. He stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Dance with me, Your Grace. There was no music, but they waltzed anyway, beneath the stars and the flowering trees, 2 people who had found each other in darkness and created light. Years continued to pass in joyful succession. Charlotte grew into a young lady of remarkable intelligence and compassion, her father's thoughtfulness tempered by her mother's warmth. Edmund, his sister's opposite in temperament, was all energy and mischief, keeping his parents constantly alert. Then, when Charlotte was 8 and Edmund 5, Caroline discovered she was expecting again. The news was met with excitement from the entire family. "Another sibling," Charlotte exclaimed. "I hope it is a sister. Edmund can be so tiresome." "I heard that," Edmund protested. This pregnancy was more difficult than the previous two. Caroline tired easily, and Richard became even more protective if such a thing were possible. "You are hovering again," she informed him one afternoon. "I am attentive," he corrected, adjusting the cushions behind her back for the third time. "Richard, I am well. The physician says everything is progressing normally. Nevertheless, I will not take chances. You and this child are too precious." Their second daughter was born in late spring, arriving with a lusty cry that announced her presence to all of Silverstone House. They named her Eleanor Sophia Leeds, Eleanor for Caroline's mother, Sophia for Richard's beloved sister, Charlotte's middle name. 3 children, Richard marveled, holding tiny Eleanor while Charlotte and Edmund crowded close to see their new sister. "I have 3 perfect children and the most extraordinary wife in England." "In the world," Caroline corrected from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "In the world," he agreed, his expression soft with wonder. On what would have been Charlotte Leeds's 35th birthday, Richard's sister, gone these 14 years, the family visited her grave in the Silverstone family plot. Richard stood before the simple marker, his children gathered around him, and spoke to the sister he had lost. "I wish you could have met them, Charlotte," he said quietly. "My children. Your nieces and nephew. They have your intelligence, your spirit. Little Charlotte especially." He touched his daughter's dark curls. "She reminds me so much of you." Young Charlotte looked up at her father with solemn grey eyes. "I will try to be worthy of her name, Papa." "You already are, sweetheart." Richard gathered all 3 children close. "All of you make me proud every single day." As they walked back to the carriage, Caroline slipped her hand into Richard's. "She would be happy, you know, your sister. Happy that you found love, that you have a family, that you learned to live again." "I hope so." Richard glanced back at the grave one final time. "I like to think she knows. That somewhere, somehow, she sees that her death was not in vain. That it led me to you, to this life, to healing I never thought possible." That evening, after the children were asleep, Caroline and Richard sat together in their private sitting room. Richard had taken to sketching, a hobby he had abandoned after Charlotte's death but recently reclaimed, and was working on a portrait of their family. "You have captured Edmund's mischief perfectly," Caroline observed, looking over his shoulder. "He gets that from his mother," Richard replied without looking up. "I beg your pardon. I am the model of decorum. You are the model of many things, my love, but decorum is not among them." He set down his pencil, pulling her onto his lap. "You are warm, passionate, curious, occasionally reckless." "Reckless? You married me, did you not? A cold, damaged duke whom all of London feared." "I married a good man whom London did not understand." Caroline kissed him softly. "And he was never cold. Guarded, perhaps. Wounded, certainly, but never cold." Semantics. But Richard smiled, that rare, beautiful smile reserved only for her. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 3 times. You are falling behind." "Then I shall remedy that immediately." He proceeded to tell her repeatedly, in words and touches and kisses that spoke of devotion as deep as the years they had shared. 20 years later. The gardens of Silverstone House blazed with summer flowers as London society gathered for the wedding of Lady Charlotte Leeds to Viscount Rothwell, a promising young diplomat whom she had met at a political salon and promptly fallen in love with. Charlotte, now 23, was breathtaking in ivory silk, her dark hair crowned with the same diamond pins her mother had worn at her own wedding. She stood beside her father, waiting to walk down the aisle, and Richard found himself blinking back tears. "You are supposed to be the formidable Duke of Silverstone," Charlotte teased gently, "not a weeping sentimentalist." "I am a father about to give away his daughter," Richard replied, voice rough. "I am entitled to sentiment." "I'm not going away, Papa. Just next door, practically. Rothwell's estate is only 2 miles distant. It might as well be 200. But Richard smiled, straightening her veil with gentle hands. "You are so much like her, you know. My sister, your namesake. Strong, intelligent, brave enough to love without reservation. Then I am honored by the comparison." Charlotte kissed his cheek. Ready? No. But let us proceed anyway. As Richard escorted his daughter down the aisle, he caught Caroline's eye where she sat in the front row, Edmund on one side and Eleanor on the other. His wife, still beautiful at 45, grey beginning to thread through her dark hair, smiled at him with such love that his heart contracted. 20 years. 20 years since a chance storm had brought him to Thornwood Park and changed everything. 20 years of love, of family, of learning that even the coldest heart could thaw given the right person's patience. After the ceremony, as celebration swirled around them, Richard found Caroline on the terrace, the same terrace where he had proposed, where they had shared countless conversations, where their life together had truly begun. "Our daughter is married," Caroline said, leaning against him. "When did we become so old? Speak for yourself. I am still in my prime." But Richard held her close, grateful beyond words for the life they had built. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, I mean. Taking on my darkness, my baggage, my impossibly overprotective nature." "Every day," Caroline replied solemnly. Then she laughed at his expression. "No, you impossible man. I regret nothing. You gave me everything. Love, family, purpose, joy. How could I regret the best decision I ever made? I feel the same." Richard kissed the top of her head. "Though I should clarify, you were the best decision I ever made. We shall call it mutual then." They stood together, watching their children, Charlotte dancing with her new husband, Edmund charming a group of young ladies with some outrageous story, Eleanor deep in conversation with a distinguished older gentleman about architecture. 3 extraordinary people, products of a love that had survived scandal and sorrow to become something unshakable. "What do you think our story will be in the end?" Caroline mused. "How will people remember the Duke and Duchess of Silverstone?" Richard considered. "I do not care how people remember us. I only care that our children remember love, that they remember parents who chose each other every day through every challenge, that they remember home as a place of warmth and laughter, not cold duty. Then we have succeeded beyond measure." Caroline turned in his arms, her blue eyes, still as striking as the day they met, full of tenderness. "I love you, Richard Leeds. 20 years, 3 children, countless challenges, and I love you more today than I did on our wedding day. And I love you, Caroline Leeds. You saved me when I did not know I needed saving. You taught me that love is not weakness but the greatest strength we possess. You gave me a life worth living." He kissed her then, there on the terrace beneath the stars, as celebration continued inside and their daughter began her own journey into married life. 2 people who had found each other across impossible odds, who had built something beautiful from the ruins of scandal and grief. And as they stood together, the Duke and Duchess of Silverstone, no longer 2 people learning to love, but 2 souls who had mastered it through decades of practice, they knew with absolute certainty that they had achieved something rare and precious. Not just a happy ending, but a happy life, together. The end. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this story. We hope Lady Caroline and the Duke of Silverstone touched your heart as deeply as they touched ours. If you felt moved, uplifted or comforted, please consider liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this story with someone who needs a little love and hope today. Your support, from the bottom of our hearts, keeps us motivated to continue creating stories filled with love, redemption, courage, and emotional twists. At the end of this video, another story from our channel will appear. Click to be surprised by more unforgettable tales like this one. Thank you for being here, the legends of the Fall Team.